I recently ended a 4-year relationship with my girlfriend who I intended to marry. I feel absolutely devastated and everything reminds me of her. The cars I see on the streets, the shows and movies I watch, the music I listen to. We definitely cross physical boundaries and that makes it even harder to bear. It feels like a piece of me was ripped off. Do you have any advice? Ugh. Bless you. Bless you, brother. Okay. Here is the thing about breakups. Number one, they are a real agony. They are a real death, especially if you cross physical intimacy boundaries and we're sleeping together, especially if you were living together. When you end a relationship like that, you really are tearing a piece of your heart out. Physical intimacy, sexual intimacy, it really was created to bond the couple together. And in God's design, when a couple was bonded together that way, only death was going to separate them, right? You were intended to be with that person until death did you part. And so our hearts, our bodies, our minds recognize the significance of that. Now, we live in a culture that doesn't, and where the formation is not there, and where there is an intense spiritual poverty going on, where people aren't taught the meaning of their bodies, they're not taught the meaning of their sexuality, they're not taught the meaning of like the lovey feelings that they have. And so people enter into these relationships, they follow their base desires into these relationships and end up bonding themselves over and over and over and over. When in reality, your body, your mind, your heart are really craving, really oriented toward this one union. So every time a relationship ends where there was sexual intimacy, it's going to feel like a piece of you was ripped out if you're in touch with your heart. Some people have numbed their heart, so they don't feel it. But you feel like a piece of you was ripped off because a piece of you was ripped off. One of the hormones that's released during climax is called oxytocin, and it bonds the other person to you. So it takes like the memory of the scent and the taste and the touch. Basically, like all the senses of the person get bonded to you, with the idea that like staying together with the person that you just had intimacy with and presumably maybe have a baby with, biologically, evolutionarily, like the chances of that baby surviving are better if you're together. So there's all sorts of like evolutionary biological reason behind it, but the oxytocin bonds you to the person. So when that person leaves, it's certain like the bonded chemicals, if you will, it's probably not, that's a simplistic view of it, but basically the bonded chemicals like remain in your body. So you feel like a piece of you is missing because they're gone, but there's a piece of them still remained in you. Again, simplistic neuroscience, but it's basically the gist. So the first step I want to say is acknowledge that this is real. So often we just numb those things we feel because yucky feelings are uncomfortable and we don't want to feel them. So like it's not uncommon to when you're experiencing something this deep to like throw yourself into more sexual relationships with people, to just like start sleeping around, to try to numb the pain, to drink a lot or to do drugs, to like numb your mind. Even something like watching porn, shopping, gambling, like things that kind of give you that dopamine hit to try to numb you from the pain that you're feeling. Don't do that because you need to feel all of the pain. The only way to get to the other side is to go through it. You can't go under it, you can't go over it, you can't go around it. You just have to go through it. And the only way to go through it is to feel it and to be in the present moment with it. And that is really, 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 really hard. I'm gonna be totally frank with you guys. I don't know how people do this who aren't Christians, because the only way that you can find real comfort in this is by understanding that suffering doesn't have the last word here. And God has defeated death by sending his son, by Jesus, God the Son, taking on flesh, becoming incarnate, Jesus Christ. He took on pain and suffering when he didn't have to, so that he could defeat death himself. He could accompany humans into eternal life, into a world where suffering ends. And that framework can really help make sense of this kind of suffering. Now, the vast majority of people will probably need a therapist to accompany them with it. I do not want to over-spiritualize it. Obviously, the spiritual life is very real, but we are incarnate, and so we have bodies, and those bodies need to be tended to, and our minds need to be tended to, and in God's beautiful design, he has given us people to heal us and help us with that. And so definitely go to therapy. Some people may even need to get on some kind of psychotropic medication to help them with it, only under the care of your doctor. I say that because I've had people in the past say, like, when you talk about when you spiritualize it, you talk about praying, you're walking away from all of the medicine. That is absolutely not true. If you've been around here long enough, you know that I believe in the medicine, but go find a therapist that can help you navigate that. If it feels so overwhelming that you're not able to like actually participate in your day-to-day life without some of those, what we call maladaptive coping skills, meaning like lots of sex, lots of drugs, lots of drinking, lots of those sorts of things, right? Are you following? So once you are, plugged into a therapist who's able to help you navigate feeling all of the feelings, once you're having the courage to feel all of the feelings, what I want to recommend that you do is you fill your time with something very life-giving. One of the things that's really hard with a breakup is that not only have you lost like this romantic partner, but you have lost your best friend. Hopefully you guys were really, really close and they were the person you went to with everything. So now that best friend is gone. You have lost the hope for your future. So you probably were planning on a future with them, especially if you've been together for 4 years. And that's a very long time, especially in young adulthood. Like that's a big chunk, a big window of your time. So all of the future hopes and dreams with that person are gone now. You have filled they're the person that you spend a lot of time with. So like probably when a big fun event happens at work or with other friends socially, you go out with that person, or when you're on the phone at night or on video chats or whatever, or with them, if you were living together, you're with them physically. All of that time now is empty, right? So you have multiple different voids in your life. And we know that humans cannot live with voids. You will fill it with something that is not healthy if you don't fill it with something intentionally healthy. So, the number one thing I recommend for this, in addition to the prayer that I talked about earlier, but the number one thing I recommend for this is service. So if you can plug into like a Habitat for Humanity or a food kitchen or reading books to sick kids in the hospital, or like just go hold NICU babies, like find something that you can give of yourself. The church is so wise when she says man cannot find himself except through the sincere gift of himself. So when we feel really lost and we feel really restless, we need to find ourselves through service to Christ in the poor, to Christ in the weak, to Christ in the sick, to Christ in the imprisoned, to Christ in the hungry. And we find Christ through giving of ourselves to those people. So I highly recommend finding a way that you can do that. I also recommend really just basic healthy things for humans. So drinking enough water, eat nutritious food. So try really hard not to be eating like junk food. I know it can be really easy to think about fast food because it's just like right there and you can buy it, but see if you can find a more nutritious option that will actually nourish your body and give you energy to be getting out of your house and doing things. Go out in the sunshine, have as much morning sun on your face as you can, as much sunshine in the middle of the day. If you're feeling really yucky, go outside and let the wind and the sun and the smell of the earth and the feel of the grass under your feet give you some energy. Make sure you're sleeping. This can be very difficult when you're grieving. Google sleep hygiene because there are a lot of things that can help you to sleep better. One of the things is like not being on your phone right before you go to bed, which is really hard because a lot of people are really addicted to their phones and don't know how to do anything without them. But plugging your phone in like your kitchen and then buying an alarm clock to go off by your bed, right? Things like that really help facilitate good sleep. Google sleep hygiene and do that. And then making sure that you are exercising. So even if it's just like a walk every day. But if you can pick up a sport like ultimate frisbee or pickleball, or if you like running, something like that, if you want to join a gym and go to classes, really moving your body can be helpful. So these are like basic cornerstones of human thriving, is tending to all of these needs, but we forget them when we're grieving and we're lost. So those are those things that I would recommend you do. And then the last piece of advice I'm going to give this person is do not go talk to her. I am a firm believer in clean breaks. They are much harder in the moment, much harder in the moment, but so much better in the long run, because right after the breakup happens, there are so many big emotions flowing, so many big thoughts. You're processing everything that happened in the breakup and everything that happened in the relationship, and you just want to talk to them about it and get answers and blah, blah, blah. Strongly recommend you do not do that. Strongly, because you will be in a much clearer headspace in like a month or two. And if you cannot dump all of that stuff onto the person right after the breakup, that would be better because you can't ever take it back. So whatever you say is going to be there forever. You can apologize and you can try to make amends, but you can't ever get it back. So I strongly recommend like 30 to 40 days where you just do not talk to each other. And then you meet for coffee and you can process at the end of those like 40 days or whatever. So as a Christian, I think it is very helpful to recognize that the crucifixion, Christ on the cross, in some ways was really just a terrible breakup, because Christ, the ultimate lover of our souls, loved his beloved, all of us, so much, and just wanted to be with her, just wanted to give himself to her, just wanted intimacy with her. And she rejected him so strongly that she literally killed him. It's like the ultimate breakup. The lover just longing to give himself to the beloved, and the beloved just completely rejecting it. So people who go through breakups, I feel like, have a really, really intimate closeness with Christ crucified on the cross, which can be comforting, because if you actually look at religious depictions, or like the Passion of Christ, like the movie, where you see what it looked like when he was actually on the cross, it is a bloody mess. And when you go through a breakup, that's how your heart can feel. Like on the outside, you don't necessarily look like that, but on the inside, the agony is just like, you just feel like you've been scourged. You feel like you have no skin left that isn't wounds. And there can be so much comfort in recognizing that Christ is there with you. And I think one of the things that people cry out in suffering a lot is, where is God in this? The idea being that like God in his sovereignty could just end the suffering, which is true, he could. But what we don't think about is that, where is Christ in his suffering? He is right there in it. Like God the Son is incarnate in his flesh, and then letting himself be tortured and abused and violated, and let his whole body be like ripped and beaten. Just horrendous abuse and suffering for love of you. So where is Christ in your suffering? He is right next to you, bleeding out for love of you. But also, when you look in his eyes, you will see that the suffering doesn't have the last word. Like he is walking through all of this with you so that your suffering can be glorified. And the beauty and power of his love for you can be made manifest on the other side of the suffering when you get to resurrect with him. And the joy of all of God's love for us, and the redemption of all suffering, and the end of all death is able to be made known in your life. So it's hard to know that will come. You have to kind of take the faith and the hope that it's going to happen. But uniting yourself to Christ crucified, reading books from the saints. There's a beautiful one by Alphonsus Liguori. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but where he goes into the suffering of Christ. You could Google it. But there is a rich beauty to spiritually meditating on the crucifixion when you yourself feel like you're being crucified in the crucible of a breakup. So those are all of my thoughts. I hope this was helpful. Please, if you want to, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at Discerning Marriage. I respond to all of my DMs personally, and I would love to weigh in on what's going on. If you want my thoughts, or just offer a prayer for you personally, if you're willing to share your story, that's one of my favorite parts of this work, is when I get to encounter you guys. And I would love to just pray with you and through Instagram, and just hear your heart and offer all of that to the Lord for you. So thank you so much. I hope this was helpful. Until next time, stay close to the heart of Jesus and be not afraid. Bye.